Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ging. Nizar Aboud of Al-Madin of Lebanon. My question is here regarding your categorization that the conflict in Syria spread into Iraq. In fact, Iraq never had a lull in attacks, suicide bombers. This has been going on since 2003, and the sectarian conflict really was larger. I don't know how you categorize it like as that. Maybe they have merged together, but not as it has went from Syria into Iraq. The other question is regarding the concentrations of refugees. They are concentrated in the poorest countries of the region, Jordan, Lebanon, even in Yemen, which is the poorest here, whereas the richer countries of the region have refrained from accepting any refugees. Do you recommend that these refugees should be spread evenly in the region, especially of those who are well-resourced and they have vaster areas, less populated, and they have deep pockets, of course? Do you recommend that?
Yeah, and thank you. So on the spillover of the Syria crisis into Iraq, it's had a number of manifestations. You're absolutely right. The challenges in Iraq have been there for a long time, as we all know. But Iraq somehow was on a more positive trajectory. But it has now been affected, of course, by firstly the spillover of 215,000 Syrian refugees into Iraq, and then more recently, of course, the whole ISIL the violence around the expansion of ISIL and the displacement that has caused inside Iraq in the millions. So we have now got over 5 million people in need of assistance as a result of that. So again, I agree with you that there was a challenge in Iraq, in parallel with the Syria crisis, but it has been significantly increased, linked to the what's happening in Syria. Now, on the refugee issue, absolutely, this is an international burden, right? It is not a burden that is the responsibility of the neighbouring countries. The neighbouring countries have generously opened their borders and allowed people the refuge that they desperately need. And, we cannot say enough in terms of our respect and appreciation for what the neighbouring countries have done. But it's not enough just to express our appreciation and our support. It's a burden that must be shared. It's a burden that must be shared. There's an international responsibility on the shoulders of the entire membership of the United Nations to share this burden. How the membership of the United Nations choose to share that burden in agreement with, in the first instance, the neighbouring countries who are hosting these refugees at the moment, is something that they need to work out. The High Commissioner for Refugees has been travelling in Europe and elsewhere, encouraging the opening of borders for resettlement of refugees from the current hosting countries. And what I'm appealing for on the back of my visit is that immediately there has to be a significant step change of financial support. Why? Because that's what the neighbouring countries are asking for. They're asking for major support financially to help them to cope with what they have seen as their contribution to allowing people the safety and security of fleeing the violence. It has an immediate impact on the functioning of these countries from the public service perspective and also from an economic perspective. So therefore, there has to be much more than food rations and very basic humanitarian support for the fleeing populations. It has to be a much bigger engagement by the rich countries of the world, as you rightly put it, to help these countries to not just cope, but also continue with their own development, their own economic development, as they shoulder this international responsibility. And we've been speaking about this for years. We've been speaking about it endlessly. We've had so many statements on it. And yet the countries of the neighbourhood are continuing to shoulder a disproportionate.
How concerned are you about the security situation in Lebanon, given what happened in the last few weeks in Arsal and in Tripoli, the influx of refugees and the militancy amongst them?
Yeah.
How concerned about that? And do you have any contingency plans for that?
We're very concerned about the insecurity, and again that's being communicated also to us by the Lebanese authorities. As we all know, Lebanon is a fragile place, and again we have to understand that it's not just a rhetorical position when the government is expressing what they're expressing in terms of their concerns about stability and security in Lebanon, and the support that they need to underpin the stabilization of the situation. The dynamic at community level is unnecessarily becoming negative towards refugees, because the perception growing is that the economic challenges that people are facing, the deterioration in public service delivery, is as a result of the influx of refugees and the competition for limited resources. Now, the only way to turn that around is to have the necessary resources that can cope for not just the refugees but also for the Lebanese population. And it's as straightforward as that. People's view will be shaped by their experience. And we hope that their experience will be a much more positive experience very quickly because of a step change of engagement by the international community in helping Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey in terms of what they need to cope with the huge additional populations that they're hosting at the moment. And then on the security situation in Lebanon, we have to understand that Lebanon has this compounded fragility because of the conflicts that have been bedeviling that country for so many years. And you know, again, we can only but admire and appreciate how under the stresses and strains Lebanon has held it together, given the fragility that is there and the tensions that are underlying and so on. So again, we can't take that for granted.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. John, thank you. I'm sorry to keep you so long.